Okay, so here's the thing. I'm just going to say this now. I'm going to say some stuff that you're not going to like. Just be aware that this isn't really a theory video. It's more of a hypothesis. So don't take anything I say as fact. This is just my interpretation. Before we begin, I'm not talking about the Mimic. As much as I wish I knew anything about him, he is quite frankly too confusing right now. What with the books being questionably canon, and the Mimic only being in one game, actually not even one game, but a DLC for one game, so really there's nothing to talk about for certain yet. Maybe after Secret of the Mimic we'll actually have some concrete information to talk about. So, where do I begin? Well, I guess from the beginning. Alright, we're jumping straight into the fire with this one. I believe that Fazbear Frights and possibly Tales from the Pizzaplex are in-universe stories made by Fazbear as part of their elaborate cover-up. Now, I know I'm not the first person to think of this, but I think it makes a lot of sense. First thing I noticed is the name of the books, Fazbear Frights, sounds almost exactly like Fazbear's Fright, the location where Mike finds Springtrap, which, if you remember, was open to cash in on the stories and rumors of the pizzerias, exactly like Fazbear LLC tried to do with the VR game, which I don't know if that was actually released in universe or not. It's not really important, but I just thought I'd bring that up. So if Fazbear is trying to change public opinion, it would make sense that not only would they hire the indie developer to make video games about those stories, but also make a series of Goosebump-like books. Because they're not just trying to convince adults to come back to Freddy's, they're trying to influence kids. This would also explain why characters from the books appear on the arcade cabinets in the Pizzaplex, because they're actually official characters under the Fazbear umbrella. So I do think there is an element of truth to these stories, but I don't think any of them are 100% true. That's controversial opinion number one. Now for the next one. I believe that the MCI happened in 1983, and 1985 is actually the date of the DCI. Now before you get your pitchforks and torches, let me explain myself and we can entertain this idea like reasonable people. Now, this story has holes, but so does the 1985 theory, or really every Fnaf theory, so I ask that you please at least consider it. So first off, if the MCI was in 1983, why don't we see anything in the minigames of Fnaf 4? Because they didn't happen at Fredbear's Family Diner, but actually happened at the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which we know existed due to the Faz tokens and Help Wanted saying 1983. But then, why didn't we hear anything about it? Well, we did. Pigtail Girl on the playground says that if you die on property, they hide your body and never tell. Where did she get this rumor? Because children are going missing at the other Freddy's location over the summer. And why is the crying child so afraid of specifically animatronics and not the people in them? Well, I believe it's because he saw one particular death. Cassidy's death. It's widely believed that Cassidy was springlocked in the Golden Freddy suit. However, I'm actually going to go one step further into that. Cassidy drowned in her own blood due to being springlocked. First off, I'll start with my weaker evidence. Number one, we have the Dreadbear DLC of Help Wanted. Dreadbear being a dark reflection of Fredbear, who, at the end of this DLC, rises out of this red lake. Number two, in FNAF AR's Dark Circus DLC, Great Escape Golden Freddy stays submerged in a tank of water till the very end when he attacks you. Number three, the Old Man Consequences minigame, which is most likely talking to Cassidy, has you drown yourself once again in a red lake. Number four, the Silver Eyes novels where William Afton explains how being springlocked works. Specifically, he says that your vocal cords will be severed and your lungs will fill with blood. And finally, number 5, in Ultimate Custom Night, when you use the death coin on Golden Freddy, you're jump-scared by Fredbear instead. And Fredbear is what Golden Freddy originally looked like when Cassidy was springlocked. But all of Fredbear's voice lines sound like they're underwater. So yes, Cassidy was spring locked, but I just wanted to be specific with exactly how she died. So, a slow and painful death where you drown in your own blood. Yeah, sure sounds bad enough to make you vengeful. Because, seriously, Andrew is not the vengeful spirit. There's still absolutely no evidence of Andrew in any of the games except for Enter the Pit, which is just as questionable as the books are. Not to mention how unsatisfying that would make the story. Plus, why would Scott put this massive puzzle in the logbook just for Cassidy to not matter? Sorry, I got off topic there. But back to the crying child. I believe he witnessed Cassidy's death, or at least the aftermath. And no, I'm not talking about the Night 4 cutscene. The Fnaf 4 cutscenes most likely take place in summer due to all the kids not being in school. But, now one important detail people don't bring up enough. We don't have a confirmed year for the MCI, but we do know what month and day it was. June 26th, a summer date. I believe that earlier in the summer of the Fnaf 4 cutscenes is when the MCI occurred, sparking the rumors that the kids tell on the playground. And Crying Child, being William's son, was there with his father during the MCI. And he was there with his older brother who likes to lock him in the safe rooms. And might I ask you what would have been in those safe rooms? The missing children, and even possibly a dying Cassidy in the Golden Freddy suit. And the person who did it? Spring Bonnie. Thus Crying Child being traumatized by the Springlock suits. The phone guy calls in FNAF 3 detail a list of events. Namely, he mentions a suit has been moved, then says not to bring people, especially customers, to the safe rooms, and then he says that the safe rooms are being sealed at most locations. I believe that these calls are during the week of the MCI and the safe rooms are sealed by William because that's where he hid the bodies. Most theories I've seen say that Henry sealed the safe rooms to trap William inside. However, William most likely didn't get springlocked until after FNAF 1, which is at least in the 90s, but the phone guy tapes are for the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which was opened in 1983, and closed before the FNAF 2 location opened. So it wouldn't be possible for it to be Henry trapping William, but it would be possible for William to hide his victims there and tell his employees that they're being closed due to budget cuts, that they aren't allowed to tell loved ones or insurance agents about it, and most importantly, that they will not be allowed to even enter to receive personal belongings. Why not? Because that's where the missing children are, and no one is allowed in, so they don't find the bodies. But all of that is assuming that the MCI was in 1983, but I can hear it now, all the people telling me that the MCI is 1985. Well, here's the thing about that. You're wrong. Into the Pit is not depicting the missing children's incident, it's depicting the dead children's incident, and here's why. First off, Into the Pit's victims are not missing. They were put on display for everyone to see. Just like the kids in the Save Them minigame, which takes place in the FNAF 2 location. Secondly, there are 6 victims, not 5. But in the Save Them minigame, there are only 5 bodies. However, there's 6 bloodstains, implying there was a 6th victim. Now you might think that 1985 can't be the DCI because the FNAF 2 location opens in 1987. However, if you look at the newspaper at the beginning of FNAF 2, it says a grand reopening. Reopening after a tragic incident in 1985 where 6 kids died. And now, my most controversial reason for why 1985 is not the date of the MCI, the Help Wanted 2 gravestones. I believe that the gravestones are telling us the order of deaths. I've seen a lot of people come up with ways for Charlie to still be first, but honestly I think we should just use Occam's razor. The simplest solution is usually the right one, and let's be real, if they gave us an order of graves where the order was wrong, that would just be cruel. Not to mention that if Charlie is the first dead, then why are the other graves in the correct order? So Charlie is probably the 6th dead. I'm not going to say the last dead, we'll get to that later, but if she's after the MCI, that's important because Charlie dies in 1983. So my final piece of evidence is that since Charlie dies after the MCI can't happen in 1985. And for all you who still believe Charlie dies first, I have one last thing I want to address, and it's a big deal. If Charlie dies first, why did Henry make the security puppet? We can assume Henry made the security puppet to protect his daughter, but the crucial question is, from what? The only reason he would make something like the puppet is if something bad had already happened, and he didn't want it to happen to Charlie. So what happened? Well, the MCI did. And Henry probably knew, or at least suspected, that William was behind it. So when Crying Child died due to a machine that Henry created, he was worried he'd do something to his daughter, and unfortunately, he was right. But Henry says a wound first inflicted on me during his Fnaf 6 speech. And you're right, he does say that. However, he's not actually talking about Charlie dying. If you listen back to the speech, he says that the souls are trapped in prisons of his own making, and then says a wound first inflicted on me.
It's only now that I understand the depth of the depravity of this creature, this monster that I unwillingly helped to create, as if what he had already done wasn't enough. He found a new way to desecrate, to humiliate, to destroy. As if the suffering wasn't enough. The loss of innocence, the loss of everything to so many people. Small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose, and used in ways I never thought imaginable. He lured them all back to a familiar place, back with familiar tricks. He brought them all together. Are they still aware? I hope not. It keeps me awake at night. I could make myself sleep, but not yet. Not until I undo what he has done and heal this wound. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this.
He's not talking about Charlie dying. He's talking about her possessing the puppet. We learned in the books that the way possession works is you have to find your body in order to actually possess your animatronic. So since Charlie's body wasn't hidden, she would have been the first victim to actually possess an animatronic. This is the wound first inflicted on me that Henry is talking about. And after Charlie possesses the puppet, she helped the others to possess their animatronics, which I believe is what the Give Gifts, Give Life minigames is depicting. So, it is my belief that Charlie died 6th, but was the first to possess her animatronic. And that is what Henry is actually talking about with his whole wound first inflicted on me line. So Charlie dies after the MCI in October of 1983. The MCI happens in June of 1983, and Crying Child dies sometime in between these two dates. Thus, 1985 is not the date of the MCI, but is most likely the date of the DCI. Now on to my next controversial thought. Elizabeth dies last. So first point is once again the Fnaf 4 minigames, where we see what looks like either Funtime Foxy or Mangle. I believe that this is supposed to show that William was working on the Funtimes during the events of Fnaf 4. So Circus Baby's Pizza World wouldn't be open until after Charlie's death, which closes Freddy's down, leading to the opening of Circus Baby's. And since Charlie died after the MCI and Crying Child, that means that Elizabeth has to be last to die. Now, while we're on the topic of Circus Babies, I realized something very interesting about the Funtimes. Well, two things, really. First off, the Funtimes weren't actually made to kill, only to capture. If you look at the blueprints for the Funtimes, there are some questionable things in the designs, but none of their features are for killing, only luring and containment. Now, Baby does kill Elizabeth, but I don't believe it was supposed to happen. In Help Wanted 2, in the job interview game mode, we see Baby give us an ice cream from a hatch in her chest. However, she doesn't have a claw in her stomach, but a regular hand. Might I remind you that unlike Help Wanted 1, Help Wanted 2 is an actual game, as in it's actually happening in the FNAF world and not a in-universe video game. So this leads me to believe that when Baby killed Elizabeth, it was an actual malfunction caused by William's inexperience with animatronics. With this and the blueprints in FNAF 6, I believe the Fun Times weren't designed to kill like most people say, but were built to capture children alive. Most likely because William got caught on tape during the MCI, so he designed them so that they could bring kids to him without being on camera. Now the second thing I've realized about the Fun Times is a little more controversial. The Fun Times weren't possessed when Circus Babies opened. Now, I'm not trying to say that Molten MCI isn't true, but the Fun Times weren't first built with Remnant, and I have proof. In Sister Location, all of the animatronics form together to make Innard, and on Scott Games we see the MCI kids realize that Elizabeth is not one of them, and they kick her out. But the interesting thing is, when they kick her out, she reforms back into Baby, because Elizabeth is the only soul in Baby. Which means when Elizabeth was clawed by Baby, Baby wasn't possessed. And if she wasn't possessed, then it's fair to believe that none of them were. Specifically when Circus Babies first opened. They were only injected with Remnant after Circus Babies closed. Why? Because William noticed that Elizabeth possessed Baby and was intrigued to learn more. And I believe the DCI in 1985 was quite possibly part of William's experiments to recreate what happened to Elizabeth. But now, we're coming to my last point that I want to talk about. And I'm going to be honest, it does feel a little disconnected from the rest of this video, but like I said, this is just a bunch of things I wanted to get off my chest. My final controversial thought. I still don't believe that Monty killed Bonnie. I know everyone believes this, but it really doesn't make sense. So, who actually did it? Roxanne Wolf. Exhibit A. Bonnie has been slashed across the chest, and we can clearly see green paint on his chest. Now, most people say that this proves Monty killed him. However, Monty didn't have claws yet. That's right. The claws that Monty has on his model were only given to him after Bonnie died because they required to play the bass. But who does have claws? And more importantly, green-colored claws? Roxanne Wolf. Exhibit B. The bowling ball that was smashed over Bonnie's head. Once again, people believe that this proves Monty did it because he's the strong one who breaks things. But one thing people forget is that these are robots. It doesn't matter who's the strong one, any of them could smash a bowling ball over Bonnie's head. And I'm not just saying that. In Security Breach, the only thing we see Monty break is fences. But when we get to the boss fight with Roxy, she smashes through wooden doors, which would be a lot harder to break than a chain link fence. So Roxy is plenty strong enough to smash a bowling ball over Bonnie's head. And Exhibit C. Her motive. Jealousy, obviously. Roxy is all about being number one and hates being shown up. I believe she hated Bonnie because he was so much more popular than her. Bonnie was part of the main band, but he also had his own stage in Bonnie Bowl. And when he disappeared, everyone was asking where he went, showing us that he was definitely popular. So popular that even Cassie's dad says he was his favorite. And Roxy couldn't handle it, so she took him out. Well, that's all of my thoughts. Hopefully you enjoyed or learned something new that you've never thought about before. I'm sorry if the editing or audio was bad. This is my first video, so I'm not used to editing. But thank you for watching. I'm Taco the Jester, and I'm probably never making a Fnaf video again. See ya.